Hey everyone, and welcome to Horror Spectator. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We dive into the darkest, most chilling real-life horror stories. And if you're a returning viewer, welcome back, friend. Your support truly means the world. If you enjoy this kind of content, don't forget to leave a like. It really helps the channel more than you know. This little community keeps growing thanks to all of you, and I'm so grateful to have you here. In this video, we're diving into two real stories from people working night shifts in remote, isolated areas, where things took a turn they'll never forget. These aren't just creepy moments, they're the kind of experiences that stay with you for life. Remember, viewer discretion is advised. I used to work in a building in an industrial office area. I say used to because after that shift, I quit and haven't accepted a night shift since. The job was highly unstable, with no contract, everything under the table, and no benefits. The truth is, I only took it because I was desperate and needed to buy medication for my mom. She had recently been diagnosed with a chronic condition, and the government, as usual, had abandoned us. The work, despite everything, was relatively simple. I just had to make sure the building wasn't robbed during the night, do a few rounds, and mostly monitor the security cameras. I don't want to come across as the kind of person who complains about everything. In fact, it's the opposite. I wasn't blessed to grow up in a wealthy family, so I've always had to fight for everything I have, and in most of the jobs I've had no luck at all. But anyway, this job was boring, tedious, but above all, it was spooky. The building was huge, with the ground floor made of glass and facing the forest. So at night, you couldn't see a thing outside. Just pure darkness. It was like looking into a black mirror. On top of that, it was located in an isolated industrial area where no one could be seen at night. Literally. During my entire shifts, I never saw a single car, a single cat, or a single light on for hundreds of yards. There was something about that isolation that made the silence weigh even heavier. It was also known as an area where robberies often occurred. I guess that's exactly why I was hired. Cheaper than an alarm, and no legal consequences if something went wrong. It was a spring day, and during the day, it had been quite warm. But since the weather was completely messed up, by 6 p.m., it started raining heavily, and it only got worse throughout the night. The sound of the rain hitting the glass on the ground floor sounded like a repetitive recording, as if I were listening to white noise. But every now and then, it would suddenly stop for a few seconds, which was even more unsettling than the noise itself. As most of you can guess, I spent the time between rounds reading, playing Nintendo, or watching movies. I always avoided watching scary stuff, even though I'm not someone who gets scared easily. I'm also not the type of person who goes looking for trouble. The building itself was already creepy enough for my taste. That night, I was reading a book. Actually, it was a thriller. And I was already questioning my reading choice when suddenly, I thought I heard a hammering sound. A loud sound, cutting through the rain. I couldn't quite figure out what it was, so I automatically focused on the cameras, trying to see what was happening. The noise continued. A dry, irregular sound, like something hitting a hard surface. It sounded like glass, or metal. I immediately zoomed in on the ground floor cameras, which were the only glassed-in area. But again, I saw nothing. Just hallways and empty spaces. I seriously considered staying there and ignoring the noise. But the truth was, I had been hired for exactly that, to prevent the offices from being robbed. The last thing I needed was to get fired or held responsible if something happened on my shift. So I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, and went to investigate the noise. I was on the 3rd floor, and to get to the source of the noise, I had to go down the emergency stairs. During the day, those stairs were already scary, but at night, they took on a whole other dimension. The echo of my footsteps made it sound like someone was coming down with me. I was getting close to the first floor when the noise stopped. I stood still, trying to figure out if I would hear anything again, but nothing. Just the sound of my own breath, a little faster than I like to admit. I decided to go back to the camera room. At first, my heart was racing so fast that I didn't even notice anything strange. I shut the door behind me and stared at the monitors for a long time. I had this bizarre feeling of not being alone in the building. It wasn't a vague feeling. It was physical, like there was a difference in air pressure. Something imperceptible, but constant. It wasn't until about an hour passed, with no strange sounds or anything on the cameras, that I finally started to relax. And then, my blood ran cold. The book I had been reading before going out to investigate the noise was gone. It wasn't anywhere. Not on the desk, not under the chair, not even fallen beside me. I was absolutely sure I hadn't taken it with me. It was impossible. I distinctly remembered leaving it there, open to page 214. I remembered that I hadn't locked the door when I left the room. Now, this wasn't just a feeling. I was definitely not alone. I quickly stood up and went to check if the door to the room had been locked. Luckily, my subconscious had been smarter than me, and in the face of danger, it had locked the door. I thought about what to do. I wasn't going to call the police over this. First, because technically, I wasn't supposed to be reading at work. I was supposed to be monitoring the cameras. Second, they'd probably think I was crazy, and I could risk being fired. But just as I was considering what to do, I heard a door opening and closing at the end of the hall. Then footsteps. Slow, firm steps on the concrete floor. They grew louder until they stopped right in front of the control room door. On the other side, I could see the light from a flashlight. It was shaking slightly, as if it were running out of batteries. Then, very slowly, a note was slid under the door, with big, shaky letters. "You have terrible taste in literature." The flashlight went out. Silence. 1 second, 2, 3. Then the footsteps began to move away again. I instinctively looked at the cameras. I wanted to see who the person was, but there was nothing. Just shadows in the corners of some of the frames. Small distortions, perhaps caused by the rain. Or maybe not. What was clear was that whoever was there with me knew how to avoid the cameras. They knew the building. They knew the blind spots. They knew how to walk in the shadows. Without wasting any more time, I called the police. Now I had concrete evidence that someone was inside the building with me. And that was my job. If I saw something, I wasn't to confront. I was to call the police. Fortunately, they arrived relatively quickly, though I felt like it took hours. The building was searched from top to bottom. Every room, every stairwell, the bathrooms, the storage rooms, even the closets. Nothing was found. Nothing at all. All the exits had cameras, but none showed anyone entering or leaving. The only proof that someone had been there was the note they left, which the police took, and my book, which was found, all torn up and soaked, in the trees behind the building. As if someone had made sure to destroy it and toss it out there, out of the view of any camera. The only thing that made them believe I hadn't made up the whole story was that, despite there being no footage, the person had exited the building through the back door, and there was a set of footprints leading to the trees. The footprints weren't mine, and they only went one way. Whoever had left hadn't come back in. I quit that very same day. I never went back, and I won't accept this kind of job again anytime soon. My whole life I've lived in a super small town in rural America. And unlike all my school friends, I loved it. I never had any plans to leave and move to the city. That was exactly what I liked. The isolation, knowing everyone, the comfort of living in a place where the community is close-knit and people look out for each other. When I turned 18, I started working at a local business that I absolutely loved. And I loved it for a bunch of reasons. First, I knew the owners, and they were truly passionate about what they did. Homemade donuts. Second, I worked shifts with 3 other coworkers who I adored. They were real friends. And third, even though we were in a remote area, the town connects to a busy highway. And the cafe was strategically placed in a spot where lots of travelers would stop to take a break. So, I got to meet tons of different people I'd never seen before, without ever leaving my town. I'm not going to say which part of the country this is, even though I know that some of you who've been through might recognize the place. Either way, like I said, I love the owners, and they asked me not to share any details about names or locations. Here's how the cafe is set up. The front is all glass, with a few tables and chairs. The counter is in the back. And on the right side, there's a false door that's disguised to look like it's just part of the wall. That wasn't intentional, just a design choice, one that might have saved my life. Behind the counter, there's a door to the kitchen and back area where we eat and take breaks. The kitchen leads to a back door where we usually take out the trash and come in and out for work. Just painting the picture here so you can understand what happened over the course of 2 months leading up to that night. It was early summer, and with the rise in tourism, the number of people coming to the cafe increased too. So, we started working day and night shifts. It was rare to be alone during a shift. Besides the regulars from town, all of whom I knew, we almost never had repeat customers. People would stop by on their way somewhere, maybe on vacation, and if they liked the place, they'd stop again the next time. But that was pretty much it. Until I noticed this one guy who started showing up more often. I'd never seen him before, but he was always super nice to everyone, especially to me, and always left a tip. Even though he was friendly, something about him made us uneasy. Like, something just felt off. One night I left work around 2:30 a.m. and noticed a car parked outside, besides the ones that belonged to my coworkers. I glanced at it and saw someone smoking inside. It was dark, and the light from the mirror reflected weirdly, so I couldn't make out who it was. I walked to my car feeling uneasy, got in, and locked the doors immediately. Since the cafe was kind of out of town, especially from my house, it took me about 20 minutes to get home. Most of that drive was on a quiet, empty back road. That night, something didn't sit right. I'd been driving for about 5 minutes when I noticed a car behind me. As I looked closer, that discomfort turned to real fear. It was the same car that was parked outside, and there was a man driving. I couldn't make out his face clearly, but I was almost sure it was the guy from the cafe. I kept driving, telling myself that maybe he was just headed into town too. And honestly, if I thought about it, that road was the most direct way. I convinced myself I was just being paranoid and kept going. But when I got into town, he was still behind me. Took the same turns, same streets. I was almost home, and my first instinct was to park and run inside, lock all the doors. But I knew that was the worst thing I could do. He couldn't find out where I lived. My parents had split up when I was 4, so my dad lived in a different house a few blocks from mine. In a panic, I called him, explained the situation, and asked if I could crash at his place. Thankfully, my dad's always been a solid, protective kind of guy and didn't even hesitate. Said I could absolutely stay, and if he had to, he'd take care of the guy himself. When I pulled up to his place, even though it was super late, He was already outside waiting for me, gun in hand. I can't even explain the relief I felt seeing him. I stopped the car, jumped out, and ran to him. That's when I saw the car drive past us, and the guy looked right at me. It was him. I knew it. I genuinely thought that would be the end of it. He saw my dad. He'd back off. The gun and my dad's posture would have been enough to scare anyone. But over time, I started noticing little things. First, he wasn't friendly anymore. His face was always twisted into this weird, unreadable scowl. He stopped leaving tips. But more than anything, I just felt unsafe. I saw him 2 more times parked outside the cafe, but he never followed me again. Then one day, when I opened the window in my room at my dad's house, I caught a strong smell of tobacco on the tiny balcony outside. My dad doesn't smoke. After looking around for a bit, I found a cigarette butt in the plant in the corner. I should have told my dad right then. Should have called the cops. But I didn't say anything. I kept quiet. Let myself stay scared in silence. Then came the night everything happened. It was an unusually hot night, and I was working the late shift with 2 of my co-workers. The cafe closed around 2 a.m., and we usually stayed until about 4 to prep for the next day and clean up. It was me, Evelyn, and Kenneth. They both knew about the guy following me home that night, and we all kept our distance when he came by, especially the girls. Around 2:15 a.m., Kenneth and I were washing dishes when Evelyn came into the kitchen saying she'd just taken the trash out and saw someone in the trees. That freaked us out a bit, but Kenneth went out to check and didn't see anything, so we ended up brushing it off. We kept working, and I went to sweep and mop the front area of the cafe. That's when I saw him, and I knew something was about to go down. He was standing directly across from me, watching me. Who knows for how long? Like I mentioned earlier, the entire front of the cafe is glass. I only noticed him because of the movement from the cigarette smoke. When I looked more closely outside, there he was, leaning against the front of his car, half sitting, completely still, except for his smoking hand. When he saw me looking, he waved. I froze. I immediately stopped what I was doing, ran to the kitchen to warn my co-workers, and then sprinted to my locker to grab my phone. I knew something was coming. I went back to the front to check again, but he was gone. His car was still there, but he wasn't. From the kitchen, I heard Kenneth yell at me and Evelyn to hide. I dialed 911. Evelyn came running through the counter door, yelling that he was trying to get in through the back door and calling my name. That door had been janky for months, and I knew that if he pushed hard enough, he could get in. Without even thinking, I told Evelyn to unlock the front door and follow me. She didn't hesitate. We opened it and both ducked into that section of wall I mentioned earlier, the one with the fake door that looks like it's just part of the wall. I was gripping my phone so tightly my hand was cramping. The police told me they were on their way. There was a patrol already on the highway nearby, and they'd be there in 7 minutes. We heard Kenneth let out a small yell and then a crash. Doors slamming. My name being called. He was looking for me. When we heard him enter the front area and let out this frustrated sound, I knew the plan had worked. He had no idea about the hidden door. No customer did. It was rarely used. The open front door made it look like we had run out that way. The police showed up fast, just like they said they would. Evelyn started crying when we heard the sirens, and even though I didn't cry, my legs were shaking from the stress and relief. They caught the guy 2 days later. Turned out he was living in town, renting a room. Small towns have their perks. It didn't take long to identify him. I later found out he was wanted in 3 different states for crimes against women. Thankfully, he's in prison now, and I hope I never have to hear his name again.